Hello, good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this last session of the day at the EENA 2023 conference. My name is Iratxe Gomez, and I'm one of the vice chairs of the EENA Technical and Operations Committee, and also working for a private company, but my role today is the EENA vice chair. So thank you for coming on to this session about the successes in successes in communications from PSAPs. We will hear about three different perspectives from Sweden, Romania, and Slovenia on how to tackle responsible calling habits and how to deal with false calls, abusive callers, and how to make people aware of the consequences of not being responsible when dealing with 112 or whatever other emergency number you have in your own countries. So without any further talk from my side, I will introduce the presenters today. So Staffan Ekengren, coming from SOS Alarm, he is the communications director of SOS Alarm since 2020. And he has an extensive background as communication expert and manager in the private sector and public sector, public and private sector, sorry, long day. Former journalist and editor, and also author of non-fiction books related to communications. Next presenter comes from Romania, Catalin Nunu, and he is the communications expert in the STS, the Special Telecommunications Service in Romania. He is a specialist in media and public communication with over a decade of experience in the communications field. And he was a journalist in his previous life before joining the public safety domain. So the last one, thank you all for being there. The last one, it's a well-known person for the members of EENA, Bostjan Tavcar. Maybe not the right way of pronouncing his name. He's the head of the IT department in the Administration of Civil Protection and Disaster Relief. And he has been in this domain, in this world for a long time. And since October 2019, he has been leading the IT and communications department of this service. So all three presentations will be super interesting, I'm sure of that. And after each presentation, there will be hopefully a few minutes for questions on your side. Please don't be shy. Prepare any question if you want to ask them, let us know. And enjoy the session. So Staffan, you're first.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and thank you so much for the invitation to this event. It's great to be here, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to see all of you. I'm Staffan. I'm responsible for the communications at SOS Alarm. We are the Swedish provider of the 112 emergency number. We have 1,200 employees all around the country on 15 different locations, and we get a lot of attention for what we do for natural reasons, because we do something that matters, like all of us here at this conference. We communicate a lot as SOS Alarm. It becomes very natural for us to do like that. We communicate with the outside world, with journalists, with our owners, with the government, with customers, with politicians, and of course our 1,200 employees as well. And we quite often get the question, how do we handle the fact that more than 30% of the calls to the Swedish emergency number 112 are wrong, false, or should be directed elsewhere. So it's a question that we live with more or less every day. And this is, of course, not only a question about communications. Basically, it's a question about the daily operations among our employees, how we handle to end calls as soon as we can, how we encourage our staff to handle wrong calls and live with that every day. But I think that communications can contribute to make the situation a bit better. And I will tell you how. We measure a lot about the Swedish people and what they know and what they think about the emergency number. And when we measure the knowledge about the number in Sweden, pretty much everyone, like 99.5% of the Swedish population, they know about the Swedish emergency number. They know about 112. It's the best known number in Sweden by far. We also measure the confidence, and the confidence when it comes to how people think that we at SLARM, how we carry out our mission, if we do it in a good way or a bad way. And we are humble but very proud over the results. We have measured this for a long time, and on a scale from -100 to +100, we have +85. That's the figure for last year. And that's much more than most other companies and governmental organizations in Sweden. Last year, we handled 33% of the calls to 112 were false or should have been directed elsewhere. And we answered in total 3.3 million calls, roughly. That means that we have a huge number on 1 million wrong calls to 112 in Sweden. It's a huge number. I know we share this experience with most other European countries. And we know that this is a real issue. And of course, given the fact that I gave you, we have a really high confidence. We have a huge knowledge among Swedish people about the emergency number. Given those facts, we could ask ourselves, is the 112 number, is it too well known? Do we have too much confidence in Sweden? Is that one of the reasons why we get so many wrong calls? Because it's 1 million, it's a lot. Our strategy, and I really believe that it's a good thing for us to do, is to communicate. It's really good for us that we have a well-known emergency number with a high reputation, a really good reputation. And I think it's crucial for Sweden as a country as well as for us at SOS Alarm. And I know that there is a discussion in other countries about this. Should we communicate? How much should we communicate about the 112 emergency numbers? How much should we talk about and address in public the fact that so many calls are wrong? But we believe that communications is a long-term part of the solution. What we do is actually that we address the issue and the problem in so many ways that we can. We want to make people in general aware of the problem with false calls. We communicate a lot, especially in our own channels, such as social media channels. Recently, we ran a campaign with the theme "What if?" And that is what if, as in, what if you have an emergency and you can't reach 112 due to the reason that someone with a non-emergency situation is ahead of you in the queue. I will show you 2 examples from that material. And this is Swedish, so I know that you can't understand what it says, but the point here is that we try to raise emotions among people. What happens if you really have an emergency and you can't reach 112 because someone else is ahead of you? I have another example from the same campaign. This is if something happens with your child. Except for the communication we provide in our own channels, we also work a lot with PR and journalist contacts. And I think that is crucial. This is headlines, Swedish headlines from about the topic wrong calls. And my point here is that we get a lot of attention from Swedish media about this question. The journalists are so interested in this topic. So it's very easy for us to gain interest in all kind of national and regional media outlets. Sorry. We have actually provided a list. It's one thing we do. We have actually provided a list to Swedish journalists with examples of wrong calls. What are people calling 112 about? For example, someone call it 112 to order a taxi, or a driver call 112 because he's out of fuel. Or someone called, this is pretty much it's sad, but it's kind of a favorite. Someone called 112 when a bird flew in their living room. And journalists, they love this kind of stories, and they help us to tell the story and give those messages out to people. We have also noticed that journalists are really more and more interested in the question about wrong calls from smartwatches and phones. So there is a rising discussion in Sweden about this as well now, with the e-calls that doesn't work as expected. What about the results then? I mentioned extensive media coverage in national and regional media, in TV, in radio, newspapers, about wrong calls. So we have reached a huge audience by traditional media. When it comes to social media and our digital campaign, we had like 4 million exposures in our own channels, and we reached around 1.3 million people in Sweden with that campaign. And when it comes to the wrong calls then, last year we had a small decline. I can't take for granted that the communication is the reason for that. I think it's an effort from the whole company behind that. But we actually had a decline, a small decline, but still a decline in the number of wrong calls. Finally, I would like to mention a couple of takeaways, experience from us that you maybe could be useful for you. I think it's quite easy to overestimate the effects of especially single campaigns, because I think this is a question not about knowledge. I think it's much more a question about people's attitude. And it takes a long time to change attitudes, as you know. So you need to be really patient. And don't expect too much from every campaign or every effort you do. I think it's a good idea to use the power, the combination of the power between traditional media and combined with your own channels. Because then you tell the story in different ways, in many different channels, and with social media, you can definitely use the opportunity also to interact with your audience, to answer comments and questions, for example. As I mentioned, think long term. You probably have to work with this several years. Another thing that I think is easy to forget, but one reason to communicate about the wrong calls externally is actually that you also reach your own staff. You also reach your own employees. And I think it's important to show as an organization that you take this issue seriously and that you address it and that you work with it. I think it's important for the self-esteem, especially in an organization that needs to handle a lot of wrong calls. And last but not least, when you communicate about the wrong calls, you have a golden opportunity to also talk about and give advice about non-emergency numbers. In Sweden, for example, we have a non-emergency number to the Swedish police. We have a non-emergency number for healthcare advice. But the problem is that people tend to call 112 instead of using the non-emergency numbers, even in non-emergency situations. And this is kind of an educational effort that we try to do with communications. And by that, I would like to say thank you for listening.
Well, you went ahead of time. Thank you very, very much. Any questions in the audience? Please don't be shy. Okay. So I'll make the first one. Sorry, no, not yet. You did mention at the very beginning and also at the end that for some call handlers, it may be hard or very hard to actually hang up calls that are not real calls or not emergency calls. Can you elaborate a bit on how you deal with it, or how much psychological support or peer support is provided from SOS Alarm in these situations in which maybe they feel bad about hanging up the calls?
Question. We work with this problem a lot because it's crucial to give support to our employees, because they handle it over and over again every working day. So we even more compared to a couple of years ago, we really make an effort to help them to both handle the feelings you get when you have to cut a call that is wrong or false, and to strengthen them in that situation, because it's easy to feel bad if you do like that. But we try to really educate them and make them strong enough. So because the thing is that they need to do this. It's the only option. But we work with it. We probably need to work even more with it, because we know that's an issue for some of our especially new employees. They are not used to this situation. I think the more experienced you get, it's probably easier after a couple of years. But we work actively with that in our education.
Thank you very much for your answer. Any other question? Yes. Wait for the microphone if you want to ask a question, please.
Hi. So do you work with a clear definition of false calls? Is it somehow implemented in the system? Is there a triage going on? Is there legislation that defines what false calls are?
When we talk about false calls or wrong calls or calls that those
not hoax,
bad calls, or those 33%, most of them are actually healthcare related, but non-emergency healthcare related. So most of them we need to address to, for example, a doctor or your local, for example, your local doctor. So that's the main part of what we call wrong calls or false calls. Then we have some calls, it's no one on the line at all. We have smartwatches and phones calling us. It's a part of the figure. And then we have, it's not the majority, definitely not, but then we have the kind of joke calls as well. So the definition is basically, you shouldn't have called at all, or you should have called someone else. That's the definition we have.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question from the audience? Because if not, we're going to the next presentation. Thank you again, Staffan, for your presentation and your answers. Very nice.
Thank you.
Next one is Catalin. Go ahead, please.
This on, it's okay. Thank you very much, Staffan. Great presentation, and I'm glad to see that we have a lot in common. You will see that. My name is Catalin. I'm a communication expert at STS. It's a special telecommunication service. This is a short background for those who are not familiar about what STS is the technical and operational administrator of 112 in Romania. We basically provide the entire secure communications and information technology and infrastructure, and we receive, process, and basically we get to the specialized agencies our calls regarding this ambulance, fire department, police, or gendarmerie. Here is who we are.
What's your emergency?
Что у вас случилось?
We are very proud of our boys and girls, our colleagues, and this type of video is video we used to post on our social media. So here are the challenges in our public communication. We have 3 categories of challenges. The most important, I think, and this is one of the points where we meet Staffan, is communicating with the media, and we use the media for our expertise on our communications. Because the media is interested in our impact cases that we handle with multiple calls, for example, or about operational procedures that we have. And for transparency and for a correct message to the public, we talk to the media and we try to keep them close to us. Regarding the awareness, here is an effort we make to reduce the non-urgent calls, and that's why we try to send appropriate messages and we try to identify the perfect channels for that. We try to involve the civil society and also the authorities. In the matter of education, and this is a long-term goal, we are looking to something that we call early education. We talk to children. We are going to schools. We are trying to implement somehow in our school's curriculum this type of involvement in the, I don't know, civil society, if you can call it like that. And we also organize events for children. We try to meet them and we bring them to meet us. Here is how we are staying in Romania. This is statistics for our last 3 years. In matter of urgent and non-urgent calls, our medium of non-urgent calls are around 40%. Here is where Staffan and I will meet again. Around 10 million calls each year. So this is our main problem, and this is our team to reflect and to find a solution. 4 out of 10 calls are non-urgent. We also have callers who order pizza or taxi at 112, unfortunately. So the main problem is not knowing the difference between what is an emergency and what is a non-emergency. And we also have, I don't know if it's correct to say that, but it's that the certainty that someone always answers at 112. So it's, you know, like a certainty that you will have an answer over there. Of course, we have abusive and malicious callers also. So what we are doing, we try to have a clear strategy with a clear audience, with campaigns, with specific actions, and also we try to involve our government and other institutions like those who are involved in educations or in the sanitary system. We communicate mainly on European Emergency Number Day in February. In any special context, anytime when we have technical or operational upgrades, we have periodic social events. And of course, we communicate when we are recruiting with one common goal, the responsible use of 112. And I can confirm you, as you see in the pictures, we have beautiful colleagues. Some of them are in the room. Okay. Each year, we try to create custom videos, like custom movies, about our colleagues, about our operators with a specific theme. This year's theme was, of course, the Russian-Ukrainian war, and how the 112 emergency service in Romania handled this crisis, because, as you know, we are neighboring Ukraine. Another thing that we are doing is lighting the buildings, special buildings in Romania, all over Romania. We started this campaign in 2022. We had then 25 buildings. This year we had 16 buildings, and this is how they look like. So the purpose of this campaign was, okay, I see a red building of the government's building, for example, and our duty was to come to give you an answer. Why is red? Because it's the 1-1 European Day, and because we want you to know that you have to call responsibly. We also talked to the media, as I was telling you earlier. We are communicating success stories, example of sensitive calls handled professionally by our colleagues. We have national and county statistics which are communicating also to the media, adapted by area depending on the number of non-emergency calls. And of course, we have examples of abusive callers, and we are also publishing that in the national media, which is very interested in them. In 2022, we had around 200 press materials. Of course, this year the interest was a little bit higher. In social media also, we have custom cover photos, we have infographics, we have stories posted online, portraits of our 112 operator colleagues, bills and everything which is connected to social media. We have a 112 day for children's. It's a day when they meet us and when they come to our workplace to explore that place and, of course, to find out more about what we're doing there. And the quiz. It's a quiz about responsibility. We basically test your responsibility with questions just to know if you are aware when to call 112. And social events, as I was telling you, we run, but it's not a running from responsibilities, but we run for responsibility. So this is it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm loving these presenters that do presentations that are shorter than the time allocated. Any questions from the audience? Please raise your hand. Ask for a microphone. No? Okay, I have two.
I will come to you, okay?
I do have a couple of questions, and in fact, they are related with the previous presentation. So I did ask about it as well. Do you in STS have any strategy or any approach with regards to supporting operators that have to hang up calls that are wrong?
Well, it's a good question, and I think it's a question that, yeah, my colleague will answer because we have some operator colleagues in here. But basically, yes, we have that type of programs. Liana, vrei să intervii fără niciun fel de problemă? Yeah? Okay.
You do have one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
if anyone wants to ask about it, she can answer. Sorry. And Any other question from the audience? If not, I will ask another one. Also related with the first presentation, sorry about that. Have you ever considered a campaign like the What If campaign in Sweden?
Yeah, it's a very good idea. And Staffan, maybe we will change some contacts and I don't know, some expertise on
it's
how
a really good idea to do that.
on how you handle that campaign. It's a great campaign. I think it's fits in Romania also.
We'd be love to.
Thank you. Last chance. 2 questions or comments or something. Thank you very, very much, Catalin, for your presentation. And we will give now the floor to Bostjan, who you have more time than the rest if you want. We are very good in keeping time in this session.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues in EENA, thank you for this opportunity. Okay, I will say something about the importance of data and to reducing the volume of emergency calls and false calls. In the first, I want to make some categories of the calls that attempt to classify the types of calls. And I don't know, I'm not really sure if you have the same experience in your countries, but in Slovenia we have appropriate 112 calls, and we also have some different types of calls. The most of these calls are empty calls. May I please? Yes, okay. Most of these types of calls are empty calls. The empty calls mean that the calls hang up by itself. So we actually don't know what is the subject of this call. Okay, we also have a missed calls. This is in case when the caller didn't want to call 112. It's just a mistake. We have a wrong calls. When the caller wants a service which is actually not a 112 service. Could be in some kind to connect with 112 service, but actually it's not a 112 service. We have calls when the caller only wants some informations, which is not directly connecting to 112. I don't know, traffic information and something like that. We have a duplicate calls when the callers give us an information about the accident that we already know. So this is one kind of overhead of the calls. We have the calls of the lonely and disillusioned people. These people just want to talk about politics, to talk about his own problems, just want to talk. And the next one are rude calls, when the callers humiliates the operators. This is not, how can I say, a good calls. And in the last one, are malicious calls when the caller report the false accident or incident. If we want to reduce the number of calls, or actually want to define the quality of the service, we have to prepare some mathematic models. And this model is actually, if we have to know that the probability density function of 112 calls, I mean the answering time and the duration time of the call is exponential function. And the time is how how can I say, is connected with the average time. So we in Slovenia we calculate the quality of 1 and 2 calls as quality at 90% of all calls. This means for us it's very important that the call duration is the call duration of 90% of all calls, because this is more precise than if we talk about average time. Average time means, of course, 50% of all calls. The another model is a traffic model. We use Erlang-C equation, and we defined grade of service as quality of calls. And in this equation, you will see that it's important thing is time, average time, and the number of calls. So, if we want to increase the quality of service, then we have to decrease the number of calls, and we have to decrease the time of calls. So in this case, we are in position to receive more calls when this number is high. You can see in this diagram how many operators you need in center for the duration of calls. Some statistic information in Slovenia. We actually have 65% of empty calls. We don't count these calls in our statistic. We actually don't know what does these calls mean, because we don't have a subject of these calls. On the other hand, we have a little percent of root calls and a little percent of malicious calls, what is of course okay. Actually, we don't have any detailed statistic for another type of calls. Some measures to reduce the number of unnecessary calls. It's very important that the public have real-time information about what has happened. In Slovenia, we used one application called Spin, and when something has happened, this information is in time pushed in this application. It's also very important to notify notify or alarming people in an incidents. In Slovenia, we used alarm system via sirens, and now we are also in a preparation to use the platform, which will be in position to send informations and alarm through cell broadcast, DVB, DVD, electronic billboards, and so on. So we want to use all possible communications channel to inform people what's happened. Another important thing is raising people awareness of the meaning of 1 and 2. It's very important to do this with young people. With training our operators for crisis communications. If operators have communication skills, then the call is, of course, shorter. Using artificial intelligence, it's, how can I say, for my personal opinion, this could be a help for operators, but artificial intelligence is not in a position to make calls himself. Not yet. Another thing is how to reduce the call time. The important is that you collect as much as data as you have to collect in call. In Slovenia, we use EML, eCall, smart locator, traffic conjunction. So we try to collect as much as possible informations, not just the informations of the caller. Another things are usage of the service to the next generation. We will now implement PMEA in the next month. We'll be operating in Slovenia. We also want to collect the data about the events and accidents from public sources. These public sources are social media, IoT system, and similar. And with PMEA, we will also implement the ability to receive the calls in sign language. Sorry. Okay, once again, can artificial intelligence replace the operator? I think that operator is still a key point in all centers. So centers is working, it's in operation when the operator is alive. And in meantime time, we cannot expect that artificial intelligence can replace the operator, but can be in a great help. Okay, and this is it. If you have any question, please just ask me.
Thank you very much. Well, we do have 10 minutes for questions. So please feel free, again, to raise your hand and ask questions if you want to. If you want to ask any question, please wait for the microphone. I'll start with mine. So you did mention a SPIN application. Is it an application for the citizens or for the media, or who is using this SPIN application?
SPIN application is using for citizens, for media, and for our rescue units. Our rescue units use it for push all informations about the rescue activities. Yeah. And people and the media use it for collect this information to inform people.
Okay, thank you.
It's public. One part of this application is public accessed. Yes.
But you did mention that you are informing about the events and accidents, all events and accidents, or just the relevant ones?
No, all.
All.
When you call in 112, then this first information will be published in SPIN as balloon form. This means, how can I say? This means first information like caller say. Yeah.
Wow, I'm impressed. Because normally other countries would be worried maybe of overexposure to the citizens to the information. I totally disagree. I'm happy to have as much public information that then prevents misinformation in social media and everything else. But then probably you are in a way very forward by informing about every single case that happens, and I think it's very interesting. I don't know if you agree, but I'm really impressed with that. Thank you. Questions? Any questions? Yeah. Okay, so I have one question. Oh, yeah, there's a question there. Great, thank you. know it's late and that you want to go to the social event afterwards.
Hello, I'm Tom from Luxembourg. Thank you for the presentation. Actually, we observe exactly the same problem at the 112 in Luxembourg, that we have more than half of the calls who are not emergency, but actually there are also people looking for help or for information. So the number of joke calls is very, very small. That's not the problem. And we have also the same strategy at the moment, trying to reduce these calls with campaigns and all this, but it's not really working. So actually my question is, have you ever thought about changing the strategy? So instead of putting all these efforts and money and resources in trying to reduce the number of these calls, trying to put these resources in accepting the calls and changing the procedures and the resources behind on the 112, because I found it very interesting that you said maybe the reason is because 112 is we have so many trust in the number is so well known. Maybe we can use that and change our strategy, so accept that and we adapt to the people. Have you ever thought about that?
Is a question for Bostjan or is it for everyone?
For everyone.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see if you can hear me. Is it? Yeah. No. I would say in Sweden's case, with as I mentioned, 33% wrong calls. I think it's something really important in your question. We have sort of accepted that we will always have a huge number of wrong calls, and I think the main strategy is to handle the amount of calls, not having a fantasy that it will become zero. From time to time, we for example, get requests from politicians. They sometimes ask us, if you just get rid of those 33% wrong calls, then you will have a lot of resources for all the other calls. But it's not that easy. So I think we need to accept a lot of we need to, it's still a problem, so not accept in that way, but we need to handle the situation even more than just think it will be something else in the future. And in our case, we know that I think today we have a discussion in Sweden as well. What's the definition for people in general? What is urgent? What is an urgent situation? What is an emergency? And I think the thoughts on what is an emergency, it varies a lot among people, and it will be like that in the future as well. So the strategy for us is to handle the wrong calls, but we want to support that with communication.
Thank you, Staffan. Any other answer?
I will have a short answer, and I hope I won't disappoint you. It takes time, as Staffan also mentioned in his presentation, and in Romania, I can say that just because it takes time, we don't have that conclusion that it doesn't work. So we have to stay on it.
Okay, I think that it's not so easy to reduce the number of false calls. But some type of false calls, you can reduce it. For example, the inquiry calls or duplicate calls. In case of big accidents, you can reduce to push the information, what's happened, through reverse 112 system, through alarming system on telephones. This is, how can I say, this is one example. But some other types of calls, especially malicious calls, is very hard to reduce, but the malicious calls is not a big number of calls.
Is any of your services, your countries, using IVR systems, interactive voice response systems, to say, to trigger, for instance, when there are a lot of calls in a given situation that, I don't know, a big accident and a lot of people is calling, and having this interactive voice response answering all the emergency calls from that area, saying, if you're calling about this, please be aware that we are working on it, or if you have new information that you consider relevant, please stay in line, otherwise we know about it, or something like that. Do you work with such systems? Because you mentioned public warning, but it could be another way of tackling false or duplicate communications and things like that.
Not yet, but we might work on it. Yeah, this is my answer.
There was a presentation this morning about that.
And we neither, at the moment, for specific occasions now.
I know the case, one case in Spain in which they have such a system for many years already, and when there's big fires, big accidents, big things like that, they put this 5-6 seconds message for every single call that comes from the area. So people know that, okay, we know about it, I can hang up. So it's an option that the services can use, and technology allows for it. Comments, questions? Yes. Thank you. Sorry, I'm happy.
Hi, I'm Gianluca from Italy, and we can confirm we have the same percentages as you, as false call or inappropriate calls. I've got a question for all of you. If a person is asking for a non-emergency question, do you provide like the correct number or the correct way to ask for that question? And if yes, do you think that it's gonna bring people to always call 112 because it's giving that information? Like, I don't know the number, I will call 112 because it has the right number to give me.
Well, it's not a rule. It depends on how much activity we have, but we have situations when our colleagues do answer, and if they have that number, they give that number, but with one clear message. This is not an emergency, and this is not the place where you can find phone numbers. So it's the time when I'm helping you, but I think it's the last time I'm doing this. Okay.
We have the same situation, actually, if we have the time to do so. But when we have a long queues, there's not a rule.
Any other answer? If not, any other question? Well, thank you all, and thank you our presenters very, very much for these very interesting presentations. An applause for all of them, please. I am happy to announce that the conference program has ended for today, but those of you who have registered for the social event, you have to present yourselves at 7 p.m. in the Grand Union Hotel. The event is fully booked. If you have registered, you should have received an email that you also need to present together with your badge and email. Not necessarily printed, but you can show it in your phone if you want. And if you planned to attend the event but you can't, please tell someone from EENA so they can allocate the place to someone else. And have a very good evening, and hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you.